Alright, so this is a preview build for Ruinarch. I'm just going to say Ruinarch because I like the way it sounds. So this is something that I've had my eye on for a little while. I actually intended to put its demo that was released not too long ago as a part of the sort of demo double or triple feature video that I did, but the demo was sort of timed at the time and I missed the deadline for it because of some internet troubles that I was having, so I ended up having to wait on that one a little bit, but I got access to a preview build for it recently, so here we are. Ruinarch is a game where you basically try to be the worst person you can possibly imagine on purpose. It is a villainous, sort of godlike game in terms of, say, Black and White or Dungeon Keeper, only it's got this concept of openness, of manipulation. A lot of the things that you do are less overtly evil and more like scheming and evil plans. I always enjoy some games occasionally where you can play as the villain because there's a certain catharsis in being able to just destroy everything for no reason. And, well, Dungeon Keeper taught us that evil is good a long time ago. You will begin by choosing a location, of which there are several, only one available in the preview right now, but there will be several. And this works a little bit like Dwarf Fortress, kind of, where it generates a sort of section of world complete with factions, characters, a history, all that sort of thing, all at once, and ends up making a sort of uniquely generated world to play in each time, which is always fun. That's one of my favorite parts of Dwarf Fortress as a game, is just what it can generate in terms of the history of the world and things. So this sort of takes a page out of that book a little bit. It's not as complex in terms of its mechanics or anything, but that's not what it's really trying to be. But very few games do that style of like world generation, so I think it's neat to see one that is definitely inspired by that very clearly. You will then choose an archetype of what sort of evil overlord you want to be. The currently available one is Puppet Master, which, as you would probably guess from the name, involves lots of manipulation, lots of more subtle methods of getting things done through other beings rather than just overt destruction yourself. I assume there will be some other ones in the future that specialize in other things, and when you select an archetype, it comes with a selection of various spells, summonable demons, special effects you can apply to people, and things like that, as well as a couple of these categories having some empty open spaces that you can choose what to put there. So you can sort of customize your loadout a little bit, even though each archetype is going to come with its own things that it's good at. You can still customize it a little bit by looking for these blanks and filling them in with stuff that you feel would work together in fun ways. And then you're plopped into the world with usually a basic objective of destroy all of the settlers, all of the human villagers, get rid of them. And you will be in an area with your basic sort of spawning portal, as well as a bunch of open space that you can build stuff. Some other features along the map, like caves filled with monsters, abandoned temples, some other shiny things that we won't talk about right now, and, of course, the actual human village itself. You can build various structures involving things like the eye, which is extremely important. The eye gives you a running ticker of current events and allows you to sort of see in more detail what's going on, what the villagers are doing, what's happening with various monsters around the map. It's just like a sort of event ticker that it unlocks, which is extremely useful. And it also allows you to do a really interesting thing that shows more of the manipulative side of what the game is going for, and that it actually allows you to store certain events as intel, and then you can sort of whisper this intel to other villagers as rumors and try to turn them against each other and make them angry and stuff like that, which is really neat. So if, say, someone who's married flirts with someone that isn't their wife, you can then tell their wife about it and see what happens. And there are all sorts of other systems integrated into this, like for instance the accusation system, where sometimes people can accuse other villagers of being certain things, like say a werewolf or a vampire or have the plague, and it may or may not actually be true, but if you're able to get people to dislike each other enough and spread this rumor around enough, people will actually start acting as if it is true, even if it isn't. So you can cause some real chaos that way by sort of getting people to work against each other, or at least be unwilling to work together, and then sort of watching things fall apart. You can also have other things like a kennel that allows you to grab monsters and place it in the kennel, and then every now and then you can breed that monster to get a copy of it that you can summon wherever you want. And as long as this ability is off cooldown, you can breed as many monsters as you want and sort of amass an army that you can summon at any time. Each monster bred being one charge of that monster that you can put somewhere else, and this can fit several monsters in it, so you can have sort of a standing army ready if you want to eventually. And this is actually how I succeeded in the first level the very first time, by basically amassing like 6 fire elementals, waiting for everyone to hate each other, and then running them through the village and burning everything down. It was really satisfying. You've also got a prison that you can detain some troublesome villagers in, as well as torture them, which can inflict them with some negative ailments and things that stay with them for the rest of their lives, which is horrible and mean. And And you can also try to convert people in a different chamber into cultists that will actually work for you. The worse their mood is and the more they hate everyone around them, the more likely it is that your brainwashing will succeed. And if you have a cultist, what's really cool about it is you can order them to do things, but they won't necessarily do them. It sort of depends on their allegiance to you, how miffed they are with everything around them. So if they're just miserable, hateful people, then you can get them to poison their neighbors or booby trap something, or even just transform them into abominations that are very tanky, horrible creatures that can just sort of suddenly erupt in the town square and cause lots of problems if you time it right. And this is where the real strength of the game comes in, because really all of these mechanics, what they all boil down to is it makes you think and act like an evil overlord, like a sort of fantasy villain, because a lot of times in fantasy villains, you don't see them just walk into a town and burn everything down with the snap of their fingers. No, they do something that's ridiculous, something that takes longer, something that involves several plans coming together at once to create some sort of greater effect. Occasionally the story will have them go somewhere and do something overtly terrible in the open to show how powerful they are and sort of remind the characters why they're fighting against them, but oftentimes they don't act like that, and most of the time they're going to be pulling strings from the shadows, manipulating people, trying to get things to sort of occur in the way that they want without overtly forcing them to. And this game, because of the way the mechanics work, actually makes you do that. It makes you think like a sort of fantasy evil overlord and actually try to spin your webs in the shadows and create these plans that will culminate eventually in the destruction of everyone in the village without overtly just dropping meteors on their heads or just killing them all in one swoop, which is really interesting because very few games actually go for that sort of thing. A lot of games that have you play the villain make you very powerful, which is nice, but that also kind of trivializes a lot of what you're there to do because you're so strong that with a wave of your hand you can summon like a million zombies and a bunch of meteors and just destroy everything with no effort. Games like Dungeon Keeper showed us that having to work for your evil, having to earn the evil that you inflict on others is actually really satisfying, and making you powerful but not omnipotent can be really enjoyable. And this game definitely takes that flag and runs with it because a big part of the mechanics is exactly that. It's about trying to get these things to happen in the way that you want, but only being able to sort of give indirect orders and only being able to sort of suggest that things go down the route that you hope for rather than just make it happen easily. Spread the plague around the village a little bit to where a couple of people get sick, and then spread the rumors that those people are sick to make others distrust them, and then while the rest of the village is looking to the village leader for, well, leadership, inflict them with lycanthropy and turn them into a werewolf so that no one can trust them. And everyone starts to just sort of mistrust each other and spread rumors until the point where you summon a couple of trolls at the town's edge and maybe a demon or two. No one wants to work together and everyone is stuck in their own houses and is just too upset to go out and actually defend the village, so they just basically get steamrolled because no one was willing to work for the greater good and actually fight these things together because you made them all detest each other so much that they just sort of waited for doomsday. That's actually a thing that you can do, which is why I said that this game is really about being the worst possible person you can imagine, because that's basically what you're there to do. You even get mana, this energy that you can spend on most spells and effects and things, by making people commit crimes or even cry. If you make people cry, it gives you this energy. So yeah, your job is to be just the worst, and the better you are at being the worst, the more interesting it gets. And this is where a lot of the other dynamic things in the game come into play. The fact that there are various factions that have different rules. Some of them may worship a certain goddess, or some of them may only allow humans. You may have some mages in town instead of just normal, average, everyday like carpenters. You may have a very strong warrior that is able to actually turn back a lot of your smaller invasions, and you're going to have to figure out a better way to deal with them because they're just too strong. You may even have blessed people that can't actually be afflicted with curses or manipulated directly by you because their blessing allows them to just sort of shrug off things that you would directly send at them, so you have to deal with them in a more roundabout way. There are also, as I mentioned, other features on the map, like, say, a remote cave filled with trolls that it would be a real shame if that person that was a very good fighter got, say, paralyzed and then dropped into in the middle of nowhere and wasn't able to fight their way out, for instance. Or maybe you find a decrepit temple filled with kobolds that are doing something dark, and you kind of wonder what may happen if you help provide them with some fodder to use for their weird devotions and stuff. And also there seems to be at least one sort of large major gimmick on every map that allows you to sort of work towards something bigger, which is really, really cool. I hope that all of the maps have something like this because it's really interesting. The map in the preview build right now has a dragon, a sleeping dragon in a cave. It's not just sleeping though, it's hibernating. It's sort of sealed away. If you just like plop a human in the cave with the dragon, they'll start attacking it, but the dragon won't wake up. So you have to sort of figure out how to wake up this dragon, and naturally dragons are very destructive, so if you are able to wake it up, that then basically wins you the game because it's going to destroy everything and nothing's going to be able to stop it. You just have to actually work your way up to being able to do that and figuring out how to do it in the first place, and that adds a certain element of sort of puzzle to the game that makes it so there are certain larger overarching objectives on the map that you can work towards if you want to help your objective overall. You don't have to wake that dragon up. You can beat the map without doing that, but it is yet another optional way that you can work towards to figure out and see what happens. And the more of that there is in the game, the better, really, because it's a very sandboxy experience. It's very much about figuring out how you want to combine the powers, summons, monsters, effects that you have in order to actually achieve your goals. And there are some pretty creative combinations here, from things like creating a big poison cloud and then striking it with a meteor to make a big poison meteor. The elements and stuff do actually combine together like that, to just working over time to create an air of untrust in the village and separating people as cultists here and there that are sort of secretly doing your bidding, and adding together a couple of afflictions like lycanthropy, a zombie outbreak, maybe a vampire in the mix to sort of mix things up and see what happens. And oftentimes it's more of the case of you just sort of pull the strings and then just watch. Like you watch the gears spin yourself, and that's actually really satisfying to sort of try and put these plans into action and then just kind of have to wait and see what actually happens. You laid the plans, but how they actually integrate with all the factions and characters and classes and things that are in the game might change a little bit. So your job is really not just to overtly pull the strings and make things happen exactly how you want, but to try and lay these tracks for things to happen and then watch what actually ends up happening and see if, what you need to do to succeed. And that's really satisfying because, like I said, making you think like a fantasy evil overlord is actually pretty fascinating, because you're not really used to having to lay complex plans and try to subtly turn people against each other, all that sort of stuff. I mean, you can do some very overt things like summon demons in the middle of town or strike things with lightning and the like, but you have a limited number of charges of those things. You can't just spam them to destroy everything immediately. You also have a limited amount of energy, and you need to be generating this energy by causing crimes and distrust and stuff in the meantime. And also, you have a threat system where different things, the more destructive, usually the more threat they generate, and once your threat gets to a certain threshold, the NPCs will actually just go after you. They'll find where you are and start destroying your buildings and the like, so you do have to be careful. You can't just cause exactly what you want to happen exactly as you imagine it just by snapping your fingers every time. There is a little bit more of a process involved in actually making these things happen, a sort of cause and effect scenario where you have to look at the factions and the relationships between each villager and their mood and what's actually affecting their mood. Like, do they have enough food? How can you limit their supply of food? How can you limit their water? Can you poison them? Stuff like that to sort of make them distrust each other. Can you put someone else's healing potion in another person's house and have them accused of stealing, and then spread that rumor around that that person is a thief, and actually have them sort of become distrusted and shunned from the village, and maybe that will make them a really good cultist later because now everyone hates them, so you offer them a place to go and stuff. It's very evil, and that's kind of the point. And I think that overall what this game really is pretty exciting, because there aren't very many games where you play the villain, and there aren't very many recent good games where you play the villain. I mean, I've mentioned games like Dungeon Keeper and Black and White, but those have not had new entries in their series for a long time. So seeing something that is interesting, that takes that sort of evil god game aspect and helps to make it different and maybe combine it with some more modern popular stuff like Dwarf Fortress's relationship and overall generation system and the like, and sort of make something new, is really cool. It will be launching into Early Access fairly soon. I'll link you in the description below this to the Steam store page so that you can check out the Early Access release date, all the news. You can wishlist it. That would really help the guys out if you were to do that and help keep track of it. And the Early Access is going to be pretty important, because if you find a neat combination that you think would be interesting but isn't in the game, well, you got your chance to actually tell them about it and have them make the game even more complex by including some new interactions and things that seem like a really fun idea. As for things that I would like to see an archetype that is a very necromancer-y style, that involves lots of gathering of undead and raising undead and causing ghosts to appear and just sort of scaring and unsettling people by being in an area that just seems to be getting darker and more full of horrible undead things as often as possible. I think that'd be a lot of fun. I would also like to see something in the vein of the map-wide gimmicks like the dragon, only something that you can take along with you, sort of like Big Wonders from Black and White, something that you can work towards over a long period of time, and if you think you can actually manage it, you can sort of build it or have it happen, like natural disasters, being able to work up to spawning a big volcano at the edge of the village, or working up to creating a big earthquake that ravages the area, stuff like that. I think it'd be really interesting to be able to choose like a sort of single wonder that you could take with you, because it would add up to another enjoyable way to set yourself a long-term goal to work towards to eventually be able to help you win, kind of like how those large map-wide events work now, if you're able to find those. So yeah, I think it's a really promising concept, and I think that it's off to a really good start. I think it'll be a really fun early access because of all of the feedback and stuff that'll be provided to them will hopefully help them just make the simulation more detailed, more complex, add some new interactions that they hadn't even thought of yet, stuff like that. So if you want to take a look at it, then please do look in the description below to find the store page yourself and wishlist it and check it out. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.